Kia ora koutou. My name is Andrew Gormley. I'm the science team leader of the Wildlife Ecology and Management group at Bioeconomy Science Institute. So that's formerly Manaaki Whenua Landcare Research as a group under the new Bioeconomy Science Institute. I just would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone that's joined us for this is our Biosecurity Bonanza webinar for today. Our presenters today, very fortunate to have Patrick Garvey, who's a senior behavioural ecologist, and Sarah Edwards, who's an environmental social scientist from the Bioeconomy Science Institute. So Patrick and Sarah will be discussing cats protecting birds. There are three parts to their talk, which will cover ecological research, social research, and multidisciplinary research. Just as a reminder, all our webinars, we're encouraging interaction and questions via the Q&A function rather than the chat function. So if you've got questions, put them in there and we'll get to those at the end. The webinar will be recorded. At the end of the presentation, we will answer as many of those questions as possible. They'll be transcribed and answered and shared post-webinar as well. So I'm pleased now to hand over to Patrick and Sarah, who will share their research with you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Hopefully you can see that now. Full screen presentation. My name is Patrick Garvey, as Andrew said. I'm a senior researcher here at the BSI, and today I'd like to talk to you about some research we did, some MB research over the last 3 years, looking at a non-lethal tool for cat management in urban environments. So just to give you a bit of an overview of what I'll talk about today, I focus on the ecological research, and I'll talk about a bit of background, how the study came about, talk about captive trials where we undertook research to identify the most promising fear cues, playback experiment in urban reserves where we took it to the field, and just a note mentioning the future research we want to do, which is protecting native birds. Then I'll hand over to Sarah, who will talk to you about a separate study looking at containing companion cats in Zealandia, and also she'll just touch on some multidisciplinary research we're hoping to do, and it's just started and we're hoping to do soon. So cats in general, a very wicked problem. So they are destructive predators, they're extremely good predators, and they can decimate populations of native biodiversity. Recently it's been described as a catscape in urban environments because cats reach densities that you will not see elsewhere. You wouldn't see these in the wild because so many well-fed cats coming together. And what happens is there's very few opportunities for birds to hide because there's few refugia in these areas with the high densities of cats, and ultimately it means that we've less opportunity to engage with wildlife because of cats removing native species from our urban environments. But on the other hand, cats are a highly valued companion animal, and there's 1.2 million cats in New Zealand and highest ownership per capita in the world. So it's this dichotomy with they're a very effective predator, but yet they're a valued companion animal. So lethal control is just not acceptable in urban environments, justifiably so. So what we really need is a non-lethal tool to help with cat management in urban environments, and that's what I'll talk to you about today. So just an overview of the research concept, how it actually came about, how the idea was formed. So predators structure ecosystems, and we know this very well. The top predators dominate the environment, and prey and smaller predators respond to where they are present. And what they do essentially is create this landscape of fear. And this is the idea that over your normal landscape, you have a risk landscape that animals perceive. So different areas of the environment might be dangerous at certain times or in certain places, and animals perceive these and avoid those areas. And dominant predators can initiate trophic cascades, so they can affect the numbers of smaller predators, which in turn affects prey. So that's the way they structure ecosystems. So we know this from research that predators structure ecosystems. But what we found out recently, well, back in 2016, when Justin Sirachi did this research, is that predator cues are sufficient to cause trophic cascades. So what he did is he had dogs barking on speakers, which he played on the shore in Canada. And what this did is stopped raccoons foraging because they wouldn't take the risk of go out there if they're exposed to dogs. In turn, this increased the amount of prey that raccoons usually prey on, such as crabs in the intertidal zone, and the food of crabs was reduced. So solely based on the dog barking, it initiated this trophic cascade. So what I remember when Mick Clout, who was my supervisor at the time, brought this research to my attention, I immediately wondered whether it could be used in an applied context, whether we can manipulate valued animals that we don't want to kill to protect biodiversity. So that's what our question is overall. Can playbacks of predator sounds protect biodiversity? So we have the kind of study concept, and then we had to select the cues. And to do that, we looked at the 4 F's of animal behavior. And these are the primary motivations that affect all animals. So fleeing, escaping from predators, obviously a key thing to survival. Fighting, this is more with conspecifics, with your own kind, whether you're looking for resources or whether you're trying to get mates, fighting occurs. Feeding, which is collecting food, and fornication, I won't explain that. But what we're seeing is that when we're trying to select predator cues, we could look at these 2 aspects, predators themselves fleeing, but also fighting. So also thinking that a cat might be very scared of another cat. So that was kind of our thinking with it. And basically we selected the following 3 cues: dogs as an obvious candidate as a dominant predator over cats, humans, as we know the humans hugely structure ecosystems as the main apex predator in the world, and cats themselves. Could we use cat vocalisations, and how would cats respond to that? So our next step was to see if we could make it work. So we did this in a captive environment for proof of concept. What we did was we caught cats from dock land where they really shouldn't have been, and brought them into captivity. And then we had, for the playback units, we had a speaker coupled with a camera, and each time a cat walked in front of the camera, that triggered the speaker. And the study was conducted in this area. It was a very large fenced enclosure that ZIP kindly allowed us to do the research. So it was 100 meters, 110 meters by 125, quite a big area, open pasture. And then we had 4 corners. So we had a food patch in each of the 4 corners. And our aim was to use these sound cues to try to protect one patch. So one patch was randomly selected from the 4. We put in the treatment cues, and then we tried to protect that patch in comparison to the others. So we used cats, dogs, human voices, and cricket. And cricket was a benign sound cue that cats shouldn't be scared of, so we could compare it to see how they respond to the more threatening cues. The sound cues were played at 60 decibels, and for each category, so for dog, for example, we had a combination of 10 different sound cues of different dogs barking and growling, and that way it reduced the risk of habituation. And we also had a 10 seconds silence first to look at cat activity before the sound was triggered. So this shows one cat coming up to the foraging patch in the enclosure, and here we have the cricket cue that's going to play after 10 seconds. So you can see how the cat responds to the cue. So the cat looks around, takes a look, but not really that bothered. The cricket isn't that scary, so it continues to eat its food and forage at the patch. In comparison, this is the same feral cat coming up to feed in this another corner, and how it responds to human vocalization. So after 10 seconds, so you can see the cat completely bolted the minute it heard the humans, and it was perceived as a much more scary sound. And that's what we found. Here you can see the fleeing responses. We had humans and cats significantly greater fleeing responses compared to cricket. And also you'll see dog is quite low there in terms of fleeing. So feral cats can distinguish between the sound cues. The human and cat sounds provoked the greatest response, most fleeing, and significant difference. You can see humans was over 75%, around 70-75% of cats fled, and dogs bark provoked the least fleeing. But this doesn't mean dogs weren't scary. It's just that cats tended to respond by hugging the ground when they heard the dog cue, because in an open area, well, guess that in an open area, cats might be scared of trying to outrun a dog, so that's why they didn't respond. But when we looked at food patch protection, you can see actually dog is quite effective here. So it's an effective cue, even though there was less fleeing, and all 3 of our treatment cues significantly better than the cricket, and significantly protected food patches in the large enclosure. So all treatments protected patches. Human vocalisations were the best cue we had. Most cats responded to it. And playbacks can deter feral cats. So you have to think of it, these are feral cats in this situation, and human voices is a very scary to them. So now we proved in general that it works in captivity, but can we show it in the wild? So this is where we did 2 studies over 2 years. First, we did a baseline study to study cats, to detect cats in reserves and also bird activity. And then followed that, we did our playback experiment the following year. We had 5 sites, and I just want to say that thanks to the community groups and councils that we worked with, because this wouldn't have been possible without them. So in Auckland, we take Atatu Peninsula and Omaha Sanctuary as our 2 sites. In Wellington, we'd Miramar Peninsula, that was one run by Rachel Shaw and her team there. And in down in Christchurch, we Travis Wetland and Styx Mills. So they were our 5 sites we used for both the baseline and playback studies. So how did we get on? What did we detect? Well, first of all, it was fascinating to see how much amazing biodiversity we have in our reserves in the city. We detected on our cameras a kiwi that wandered on the beach, seemingly from Shakespeare. There was dotterels present at Omaha site. Little penguin in Wellington turned up in the cameras. We had banded rail in Te Atatu in the middle of the city as well. And spotless crake we captured on cameras down in Travis Wetlands. So there's an amazing amount of biodiversity eking out, surviving in our cities. But we also captured the other side of it. So this is a cat killing a duckling. It took nearly 45 minutes to kill that duck in front of the camera after it wandered across. And this is another cat that there was 2 cats from a particular household that we knew, and they predated birds daily, were going into the reserve and predating birds frequently. And you can see this poor pukeko chick is being carted away. So we have this amazing biodiversity, and we have this clear challenge of cats in reserves, often domestic cats. So, but we also discovered some other interesting things. This is from Omaha. We had 4 cats intruding into a reserve. There was 49 intrusions in the space of our 3-month study. And it varied. The different cats turned up at different times. Some were, one cat was turning up very frequently, one less so. But there is problematic cats, and they can have non-lethal impacts. And this was something that we didn't expect, but we found a very clear response. So what these videos show is this is a cat visiting a dotterel nest, and the parent leaves the nest and doesn't return for a long period of time, and it's an excessively long period of time. If the bird stayed, it would have been predated, but by escaping, it saved itself, but maybe didn't save its nest, because on average it took 17 hours for a bird to return to its nest after being scared by the cat. And this is kind of an insidious way that cats influence our breeding birds, not necessarily by killing. There's no trace of this, but this nest would have been exposed to the elements and aerial predators such as black-backed gull for the day. So it could be a huge problem that we don't even recognize yet. So next up was we've shown the biodiversity, shown the cats in reserves, and now we wanted to run the playback experiment. And this shows one site in Miramar. You can see the pink dots are our cameras and speakers, and the yellow dots is an independent camera grid where we'd no playbacks, but we just wanted to understand at a site level what was happening. We'd 4 urban reserves. We selected 2 sound cues, either human or cats. We didn't use dogs because we didn't want to, because it wasn't very powerful in the pens, but also we didn't want to set off every dog in the city, so to stop other dogs barking. We'd 80 cameras with playback speakers, and then we'd an independent camera grid of 30 to 40 cameras to pick up cat activity. So it was a 3-month trial. Either cat, cricket or human were played for 1 month, and these were randomized across sites, so anyone could be starting off. And we wanted to look at what effect these playbacks had on cats in these reserves. So this is some of our results, and there's a lot of results. I can only show you a fraction of it today, but the overall across the 3-month study, we identified 124 individual cats. There was others not being able to identify as individuals, but there was more cats there than this. Cat vocalisations provoked the greatest response. It was really these cat sounds that they responded to rather than the humans that we'd seen in the captive trial with feral cats. And what you're seeing in the bars, the percentages there, is the amount of cats that were one and done, that had a single exposure during the treatment period and were not subsequently detected during the treatment treatments were active. And you can see that cats, 42% of single exposure fled and were not spotted again. So this is quite a promising result. Crickets, there was actually a large amount of fleeing as well. Maybe it was a shock response to the sound, but it induced fleeing not as much as cats. And then human was the least. And if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense because we're talking about primarily domestic cats in urban environment rather than the feral cats that we had previously. So the other key results we've had from the study was cat vocalization reduced foraging by up to 90%, highly effective. Cat sounds provoked the most fleeing. Again, it was similar to the percentage of one and done, so about 40 to 50% of fleeing was done to cat sounds, and humans provoked the least fleeing. So now that's kind of the general results at the camera site, but how did it work on the independent camera grid? So how effective were cat cues at scaring cats at a site level? And what we found across all reserves is we did 30% reduction in cat detections while the cat playbacks were playing. So this is a pretty cool result, highly significant in our models, but also humans had a good effect here across all reserves. There was about a quarter less cats detected during the human playback periods. And there was variability across sites, but there is variability within sites. There's different makeup of stray and cats within these reserves. Some are smaller and it's all domestic, and you can see the responses varied, but the least reduction we did was 16% with cats at Miramar, and the highest reduction we were doing was up to 84% at Sticks Mills. So there's variability across sites, but there's a clear indication that these cat vocalizations have a strong effect. So just to touch on where we could use this in the future, it could be used to help reduce cat incursions into reserves. Primarily, our original plan, and the one we're going to fulfill, is to protect breeding birds, particularly colony breeding birds. And also it could be used to target rogue cats. We do get cats that avoid capture in live capture traps that decimate colonies of native breeding birds, and this could be used as a way of kind of breaking the cycle from once they start predating on the birds to reduce the harm that cats are causing. But also it's very useful for community engagement, and this is what Sarah will talk about, the social aspect, but I think the ecological data that we collect can be used by schools or by community groups to make them aware of what's happening, but also to talk to owners about whether they want to let their cats roam when they see the damage they're being done. And future directions, we've new approaches to cat deployment. We're going to make some adjustments to the way we did it because we think we could create an even stronger effect at landscape scale. So we'll have a new approach when we deploy next. We want to protect colony breeding birds, and definitely we want to work in a combination of an ecological and social space. So just finally, just to summarize what I've spoken about today, predator playbacks can be highly effective. Feral cats avoided humans primarily in captive trials, but the other cues were effective. Urban cats, primarily domestic cats, were most fearful of cat cues. So it's interesting, these categories of cats, so to speak, have biological meaning, because feral cats respond very differently to human cues than urban cats. Domestic cats are a threat to biodiversity and diminish our ability to connect with biodiversity in urban reserves, but it's also a cat welfare concern, because vets, the primary issues they have to deal with are often cat fighting as a #1 issue, but also cats getting knocked down as they try to cross roads, and also getting zoonotic disease from other cats. So really, roaming domestic cats is also a cat welfare concern that we have to try to reduce. And future direction, really we want to protect native biodiversity, that's our next big project, and also ecological and social research, that combination of both using ecological data and findings and social perspectives to create a more coherent cat management approach. So that's the lot for me. I really want to acknowledge all our partners and stakeholders who the work research couldn't have been done without them, and also Seawing, who was initially hired as postdoc in the project and did a lot of this research herself. So thanks very much for your time. I'll now pass over to Sarah.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. And I'll be picking up on some of the threads that Patrick has introduced there around cat ownership and responsible cat ownership through some research that was done through a social lens by a group of social scientists at Manaaki Whenua and also Ali Palmer at the University of Auckland in partnership with Zealandia. So I'd just like to acknowledge the work of Danielle Shanahan and her team in supporting and really helping us do this research that was funded through the MB SIF fund, where we were trying to understand the containment of companion cats in the area around Zealandia. So picking up on Patrick's point there about trying to stop the roaming of companion cats as a non-lethal management tool. So before I get into details about this case study, I'll just give some background there. As Patrick's already mentioned, we've got very high ownership of cats in New Zealand, and most of those are allowed to roam. It's difficult to come up with a definitive figure on roaming, but it is very high, and particularly in relation to other countries worldwide, we've got high rates of roaming amongst pet cats. So cat containment, so that just means restricting a cat to a property or house, is often promoted as a key aspect of responsible cat ownership in order to protect not only the welfare of cats themselves for the reasons Patrick gave, but also to protect native wildlife as well. So we went into this research thinking about, well, what does it mean to be a responsible cat owner, and how does that connect to the containment of cats? But also, very importantly, what are the practical challenges that are experienced by cat owners in their efforts to contain their cats? Because it's not as simple as we might think or hope. So to move on to the case study site, as I mentioned, we were looking at the area around Zealandia. And as I'm sure you all know, Zealandia is an eco-sanctuary very close to urban Wellington, central Wellington, as you can see in the map there on the right. And it's the world's first fully fenced urban eco-sanctuary. And that fence has been designed to keep a number of predators, including cats, as you can see in this photo, out of the sanctuary. As a result of that, native wildlife is thriving, but as it spills over the fence, it's predated by a number of species, including cats. So the containment of pet cats, companion cats, could help reduce predation rates. So we conducted qualitative research in households in that halo area around Zealandia to try and understand these containment practices. We did 22 interviews in households in that area this time last year. And in those interviews, we found differing notions of responsibility, what it meant to be responsible for a cat did differ. So some of those owners were responsible for their cats, and they dismissed the impacts of their cats on native wildlife. My cat doesn't hunt. My cat doesn't go anywhere, even though it's allowed outside. Oh, those animals have been killed by window strike, etc. And so they allow their cats to roam as a result. But then many of the owners that we spoke to, and probably higher than rates across New Zealand, did see themselves as responsible for cats and wildlife. So they were working really hard to mitigate impacts on native wildlife by containing their cats. But this was not simple, and it came in many different forms. So there were different approaches. Only 5 households didn't contain their cats at all, but we witnessed backyard containment in the garden, full indoor containment, nighttime only containment, and a mixture in houses that had multiple pets. And homes and gardens were transformed in the process. So it might involve putting up a catio outside where a cat could spend time outside, changing fencing with spikes that wouldn't hurt a cat but would prevent it trying to escape the boundaries of a property, or transforming the inside of the home with enrichment activities to make the cat want to stay inside and be happy and fulfilled there. But some take-home messages that we found through this research, if we want to give advice on how we can contain companion cats, we noticed there are numerous challenges encountered, and a lot of that is to do with the structure of our homes. And cats can easily escape through doors, windows, and over fences. So this does have implications for property design. We also found that nighttime containment did not lead to 24-hour containment. So nighttime containment still allows an element of roaming. So that does have implications for messaging strategies that might see nighttime containment as a stepping stone to full containment. And owners need support to implement containment without judgment or vilification. So we do need to think beyond individuals and build communities of practice. And there's a value for online groups that allow anonymous participation in that support. And then containing cats is really hard. This was a message that we heard time and time again. It's not an education approach. We need to support people to do it. And part of that also is to shift the narrative that cats look after themselves. They're easy pets and they don't need input from their owners. It is anything but that. And then finally, to round off, just touching on the project that Patrick mentioned there, we're looking now at combining social and ecological approaches in a project looking at managing feral cats in the Canterbury region, working with ecologists and social scientists, so combining those different approaches to try and come up with non-lethal and socially acceptable approaches to feral cat management. And I will pass back to Andrew.
Fantastic. Thank you very much to Patrick and to Sarah. That's, yeah, excellent talk. We are approaching 1:30, but we're happy to go for those that can stay over time to address some of the questions for a few more minutes, and those that don't get answered, we will collate responses to those, certainly. So just looking in the Q&A question, do you know if the commercially available sonic cat repellers are effective? One for Patrick there.
Yeah, a good question. I can't answer that. I suppose we just came at it from a different angle, but I really can't answer that question. Sorry, I don't have any experience with those.
No, that's all right. So a couple of questions that are related. Has there been any work done on the impact of these vocalisations on indigenous species? So will those cat noises, for example, scare birds off nests? And similarly, do the devices repel the birds?
Yeah, great question. We talked to an ornithologist on this, and they said that we'd have to do some research to ensure it, but we can see birds appear in front of camera all the time, like geese and pukeko, and they don't respond to the sound cues. So there would need to be research done on this. We know, for example, corvid vocalisations can influence nesting success, but from our experience and from the distance we'd have it away from any nesting birds, we'd ensure that it didn't have any negative impact on the breeding birds first.
Cool. A question about cat breeding seasons and that seasonality aspect. So would cat vocalisations potentially be an attractant during certain times of the year, perhaps?
So what we used as a cat cues, I didn't describe what we did, but we used a feral cat dominant territorial calls, yowling by feral cats. We imagine that it'll be a very small minority that would want to face up to a dominant male cat, only maybe potentially other males. There could be some seasonality effects, but we conducted the trial throughout the year, so we didn't seem to notice anything. there could be impacts where like a large male cat might approach it rather than be deflected by it, but the majority of cats won't take the risk to get in a fight.
Cool. Potentially interesting question here. So a comment that it's quite disheartening not to see the resurgence of the National Cat Management Strategy, which would potentially pull a lot of these issues together. Politically a sensitive topic, it would seem. So would either of you care to comment on this at this stage, or what you would like to see happen?
Next biosecurity blitz, we'll have commercialization of cats in space, I think is the no, but I think it is a pity. I think Sarah can talk to this better, but it is a pity that we haven't an opportunity to continue some of this research, because I think it's vital for New Zealand.
Yeah, I just want to agree with whoever made that comment. And we need, the good thing about that strategy was it was advocating for a multi-pronged approach, not just like a silver bullet kind of thing. So we do need that more complex thinking about cat management that does put cat welfare at the heart of any management strategy as well.
A couple of questions that are in the chat rather than the Q&A, but quite good questions. Cats are also visual predators. Do you think your results would change significantly with both sound and movement devices?
Good question. I don't think it's a good question. I'm not sure how the response would change at the fixed location, because they'd either be seeing the silhouette or whatever of a cat before they'd hear the vocalization. Ideally, we want the cat to be able to make the decision from a distance. So it hears that an area is scary and just avoids it, just doesn't take the risk of going into it. So I think that would be the ideal scenario, that the cat's making the decision from afar, which wouldn't have a visual component. But how cats respond if you also had a visual cue at the sound device, I'm not too sure, but I imagine it would be additive. So a good suggestion.
A couple of related questions around habituation and conditioning over time. So is that a potential that the cats will become desensitized to playback sounds, and how might we go about reinforcing some negative outcome, I guess?
Yeah, I suppose absolutely that is a risk habituation. We didn't see it during our trial, and I have some results that show that the detections of cats per week continuously dropped with the cat treatment. So by the end, there was the least amount of detections. So each exposure was causing more effect. We used a combination of 10 different sounds. So each time a cat was exposed, it shouldn't hear the same thing, which would reduce habituation. But it would definitely be a risk. So what we'd like to do is try to focus this technology during breeding bird season, so like not to be using it year round, to just use it to protect birds during when they're most vulnerable. And I think by doing that, the risk of habituation would be much lower. But it's definitely a consideration.
Probably time for a couple more. So, I mean, this is obviously around cats, but has similar research been carried out or planned for using this audio type approach for other target species, so hedgehogs, for example, in braided rivers?
Yeah, great question. We have thought about that, and we're hoping to do it. So Justin is doing something on desert tortoises over in America, and the only other applied research for sound cues I know is on moose in Sweden. So there is possibility for other species. One that we've been thinking about is feral pigs, because they're a valued hunting resource, but they're a destructive pest as well, particularly for ground nesting birds. So and human vocalisations and dog barking would be particularly scary for hunted feral pigs. So yeah, we're definitely looking at the potential for other areas, but we haven't kicked off anything yet. And I think there's just one other study available for it's been in an applied context on moose in Sweden. Right.
And probably last question for now, and for any that we didn't get to, we'll as I say, we'll address those. So we've talked about obviously audio, but what about odor elements for deterrence?
Yep. So originally we were planning to do both, having odor and sound together. One of the issues is predator odor tends to attract other predators, because it's not like there's a predator currently there. It's like a place was risky in the past, but now it's safe. So now you can check out, find your information. So since we were seeing predator odor attracting predators, we decided just to go with sound cues. But if you could produce odor at the same time, we imagine that it'll have a stronger impact. So absolutely, it's a good idea to combine these cues. And it was something we thought about, but we decided just to go with sound alone in the end.
Actually, one more question I've just seen, and I'll ask this. So what about operationalizing this work? So someone has an example of a penguin colony they monitor. Could there be some sound barrier set up 50 or 100 meters away from the colony that doesn't disturb the penguins? I mean, do you see these as single audio playback devices, or like a virtual fence of them, if you like?
Absolutely. Yes, we saw it as a kind of virtual fence. That was how we were imagining it. Also, so absolutely, we could use it to protect colony breeding birds, and that's our next plan. So please get in touch if you want to do that. We've kind of ideas how that might work. So an interesting thing would be combining it with live capture, because you imagine the shy cats, so to speak, might be the ones that are easiest to scare, where the bold cats are the ones that other research has shown that they're easiest to trap. So a combination of using live trapping and sound cues could give you the best bang for your buck. But absolutely, we're hoping to use it to protect breeding colony birds. So please get in touch.
Look, wrap that up now. Thank you very much, Patrick and Sarah. It's excellent sort of topic, highlighting that a lot of our issues in New Zealand have got ecological as well as, large social dimensions to them. So yeah, really excellent to see those two areas coming together. As I say, a copy of the webinar and recording, well, the recording has been made and the Q&A questions will be addressed. So yeah, on behalf of the Bioeconomy Science Institute team and Patrick and Sarah, thank you very much for joining us today. Ka kite.
Thank you.
Kia ora, ka kite.